Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, Doom Productions. We make feature films and videos about filmmaking. And earlier this year, we made a feature film called Little Black Submarines. It's out now after many hurdles. It's out and you can check it out on our channel. And I recommend doing so because today we're sitting down and we're going to talk about it because it's a movie that we wrote together.
Yeah.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Andrew.
Yeah. And we wrote a feature film and it's out now and we're going to talk about it.
Great.
Yeah, if you're a returning viewer, you've heard us talk about this elusive Andrew Price, who co-wrote Little Black Submarines with me. So why don't you introduce yourself to some of the folks who might not be familiar with, well, I guess everyone clicking on probably isn't that familiar with who you are.
So my name's Andrew Price, and I have a long background in low-key, underground, you've never heard of it, filmmaking.
Yeah.
And Jordan and I met at the film school that we have both taught at and that I went to. A lot of Jordan and I have written a pilot together that was a project of mine that I wanted to just make it to actual written down screenplay form. And then we were in the middle of kind of figuring out what we wanted to do next. And he's like, I'm writing this crime movie. It's kind of a sequel, prequel, sidequel thing. And
I had to give you the Chlorine crash course.
yeah. I remember that we had booked a space at the library with a whiteboard, and you actually had to draw a diagram of how this movie fit into the Chlorine cinematic universe.
Yeah.
And it just sounded really fun. You knew what rocks you had in place that you were like, these are not moving. This movie is going to have these things in it. I tried to talk you out of at least one of them. Yeah. And you were like, no. Yeah. I'm telling you, this is happening in this movie. Yeah. What were the three rocks?
When our movie, so I think there was three things that I wanted. I wanted a car chase. I wanted like just a gunfight of some sort, and then I wanted a spaghetti western style gunfight that was gonna also be a musical sequence.
A showdown.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can't do the showdown. That is going to be really bad. There's no way to like pull that off. Yeah. And that's the one you were like, nope, like it is happening. I think it should happen. It is happening. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I love it because reading different people's reactions to it, they always call out the car chase and the showdown at the end as their favorite parts. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I mean, to your credit too, you also took it as like this is what is going to be in the movie. Even if I don't agree with it, I'm going to do everything I can to make it work and make it make sense, which is really helpful. Because I think sometimes if people are writing, like, I kind of think like group projects, if there's like if everyone's really agreeable and you were kind of more willing to take the back seat in a weird way on this one, which might sound kind of, I don't know.
Which is how our writing partnership works, which is like the pilot we wrote together, story one, that was hands down my project. You were coming along and co-writing with me, but I was like the boss on that. Right. And we were really clear. We were like, okay, now it's your turn, basically. And we were looking at a few different ideas. And then you were approached with this, and you were like, can we focus, like, can I bring you in on this? Right. And I'm really egotistical, so I was like, yeah, I'm in. Yeah. And I love restrictions. So as soon as I knew that, okay, these things have to be in there. Right. Then it was a matter of like, okay, what's the how can we pull this off? Yeah. That it doesn't feel really corny, feel totally like something we've seen before, doesn't feel like out of nowhere.
Right.
If you had a showdown in like Breaking Bad or so, like to pull from like a crime genre,
right,
it would not feel good.
No.
And so that you and I, we tend to kind of break story together, and then we pass the script back and forth,
right,
and revise each other's drafts.
You
did. I actually didn't break the story with you. You had written like 3 drafts or something by the time I came on board.
Something like that. I can't remember.
You'd written a handful of passes. And for the viewers at home, Jordan writes super fast, and kind of instead of like outlining or doing a treatment, really, although I think you probably do that too, you just, you're like, I'm just going to write the whole thing.
Well, that was what was different about this one, was because normally I have a 4-step process, which I've talked about on this channel. You can check it out, but I'll do a beat sheet, and then I'll do an outline, and then a scriptment, which is essentially the script with no dialogue, but it just has like, they talk about this character wants this or whatever, and then I do the script. And so when I did this one, I'm 90% sure I did the beat sheet, the outline, the scriptment, and then I would just do the entire script in a day.
Yes. That's what I want.
Yeah.
The viewers at home to take note of. It takes me, that same process is like, I've never done it. I've actually never done it in a feature.
Well, it's not as...
But it would take me like 3 years.
When you think about a scriptment, like, let's say you spend a month on a scriptment, you're pretty much writing the script except for the dialogue. So on the script, in an ideal world, all you are doing is just writing the words. Right. So it doesn't seem as crazy when you put it like that. But on this one, I know there were days where I had stuff in the scriptment, and as I was writing the script, I was like, oh, I should change this, and there's a little bit of copying and pasting and rearranging some stuff.
You were working on which
Little Black
stage?
Submarines.
I mean, which stage of the process? The first draft?
A couple of drafts. I can't remember which one exactly. I remember there was one session where I was writing something and I thought it was going to take X amount of time. And then I was like, ooh, I've just added like an extra 2 hours onto this because I know that I have to do some mental work to fix this problem. Whatever it was, I can't remember. But yeah. You
were okay with the scriptment and the script kind of speaking into each other.
Yeah, exactly. And part of that was timing too, because this would have been a great interview to do like 9 months ago.
Yes, we've forgotten everything about the making of this movie.
I think we weren't like behind schedule, but I know there was definitely a cutoff point where the script needed to be done by a certain time, because it was like we had to send the script off to the actors to memorize. We needed to know how many scenes were locked. We needed to know the locations, the props, and all that sort of thing. And when you are working with pretty much no money, it's even more important to have all that stuff, so you're not wasting people's time when you show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more prepared you are, the more money you save.
Yeah.
Or time.
Yeah.
And or time.
Let's back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's do a very brief timeline in terms of how we met.
Sure.
And how we started writing into, I guess, going into this project. Because I'm sure there's people who are going to watch this, or people are curious, like, I want to write, but maybe I haven't written anything yet, or maybe, like, I'm curious about other people's processes and how they get started writing, or people who want to work with other people. Because writing can be pretty tricky if you don't have someone. So I guess let's rewind, because our journey might help other people.
Yeah, let's see if we have the same narrative too.
Yeah.
So we were co-workers at the Northwest Film Center School of Film, RIP.
Well, before that.
Before that?
Well, before that, there was one moment when our paths crossed. I like to believe it was us. Because me and Ethan were taking classes. We were doing the intro, like Filmmaking 101 or whatever it was with Bushra. And so I remember going in to edit. Well, there was the media lab upstairs where you could edit. And I remember one of the days when I was editing, I was up there alone and I was editing, and I had a question about Avid. And I went down to the equipment room and I think you probably helped me with that.
Okay.
I like to believe
How
that
did
was
I
you.
do helping you?
Well,
Because I'm bad at Abbott.
the problem that I had it was user error, not computer.
Great.
And so you identified it as user error. So it was helpful, I'd say.
And I pointed at you.
Yeah.
User error.
Yeah.
Stormed out of the room. I remember that. No.
Yeah.
I totally believe you. And I wish I could see like security camera footage of me just being like.
I know. Well, it's one of those things. It was such a passing moment. Yeah. But when I came in for the job interview, I like vaguely recognized you. And I was like, I think that was the guy who helped me that one day on Avid.
There weren't a ton of us that it could have been, and
it was either you, Stephanie, or it definitely wasn't Miles or Stephanie.
Like each other, so
yeah, or Lucas or Injun.
Yeah. So we were at the same place,
same time.
Eventually became coworkers.
Yes.
Started teaching camps together, kids filmmaking camps,
which is a really cool thing. Which more people, I wish something like that existed.
Yeah. I think it does, but
it's different. It's slightly different, yeah.
Yeah. It was the best.
Yeah, best job I've ever had, easily.
Yeah. Same here. And then
it was a summer gig,
a summer or two in,
because I wasn't working year round necessarily. But were you year round?
I did a little bit of everything at the film center, so I was always there.
Yeah. Okay. But I was there for the summers, at the very least. And then sometimes, on occasion, I would help out with like a class you taught in between the summers, like during...
Yeah.
There was a cinematography class. I think
And you assisted other teachers.
Melissa and like Beth, I think, and some other teachers, yeah.
So we kind of just kept crossing paths, and during the summer, we were in the trenches together, teaching kids. And then I'd say probably our second summer in, maybe it was our first, but I think probably our second. I was like, we were just like both walking to the bus or something, chatting about projects we were working on.
Yeah.
I told you a bit about Story One, a TV show idea that I had, and it was like, oh, I don't know who suggested it, but you reading it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'll send you what I have, which was like everything except for writing, because it was like maps and character names and lots of backstory, but no like clear sense of a bit of like this happens, then this happens, but not much.
It was like a historical document. Like here's a research.
It was, and not a movie or not a show or like a pilot. And you read it and you like gave me feedback, and then you were, and then I was like, I don't want to like. There's no pressure at all, but would you write this with me? Like, could we work on it together? And you were like, oh, I was going to ask you that. If we could work together on this. So that was really cool. And then you brought in a bunch of ideas which were totally different from what I was thinking, but enriched the project immensely. And added a lot to like the lore and stuff. And then that's when we kind of started establishing our pattern of meeting up, talking story, and then you took on the first draft.
Yeah, because the way we write, I think we discovered like our process, because I think that was a thing in like the beginning of like, how do we do this? Because I know Caleb and Nathan from RC, our producers on Little Black Submarines, what they do is when they're writing, they'll like be in the same room, and they'll either be sharing the typewriter or they'll like have the same document pulled up or something. I can't remember exactly.
They use a typewriter famously.
Yeah, I know. But they'll like one character will, or one of them will be like, I'm gonna be in charge of this character today, and the other person will I'll take this other character. And so when there's dialogue scenes, they'll just go back and forth and they'll type out what the character would say, which is not what we do usually at all.
Nope. And that's similar to how I had worked in the past with a writing partner, was like basically someone would sit at the keyboard and type until they kind of ran out of juice, and then they'd tap in with the other person and they kind of sit and type, and with a lot of story conversations building up to it.
I think I mean, we almost function more like how you hear a writer's room doing it, where a writer's room will get together, they'll kind of map out everything, they'll discuss this aspect or this theme or this character or this, and that in the story. And then they just go off and like this person takes this episode and that person takes that episode. In our case, it's like, it's Andrew's turn with the script. So he'll take it and he'll get X amount done by this date, and then we'll kind of go back and forth like that.
And my X amount is always way smaller than Jordan's X amount. Because I would rewrite like the first 3 scenes. And I'd be like, that's it. And like 2 months later, I'd be like, oh, here, you take it. And then Jordan would write a whole pass on the script, and then I'd get it back, and I'd be like, oh, and do another rewrite 3 scenes, and then you'd take it and like do another whole pass, which is really what I want people to understand, is that Jordan is really fast, and a lot of it is just like you're spitballing and you put it in there. And I want to know from you, because I'm the opposite, because I'm filled with terror the whole time I'm writing. It's only fear. And occasionally I can tap into like some playfulness, and that's where the actual like writing comes in.
Yeah.
And who's driving when you're writing in the Inside Out pantheon? And how, like, if it's not, how do you turn off fear when you're writing?
I think I don't know. I enjoy it, I think, I don't know. It's weird because it is work, but it's like fun work. I mean, I don't know, because there are I've worked on stuff where I'm writing and I'm not enjoying it as much, and I just kind of force myself to do it. But that means when I'm really excited about something, like it makes it go a lot better.
So is there a muscle then, would you say? The ability to just push. Would you say you've cultivated that? And then when you really like it, you're like really going.
Yeah, I would say so, because it's like I'm like it's like that discipline over motivation kind of thing, where I going through the habit of writing is it's just a muscle to use, like you said.
Yeah.
And I don't write as much as I used to. Right now, it's kind of like more scattered stuff, but part of why I would go through, like, there's a couple of reasons I would just write really quickly, and I think more in the story one days. Like, if I had an idea for a movie, I would go through the beat sheet, the outline, the script, and I would just go through all that just to, like, get it out, essentially. Just because I was curious. And I would...
a short amount of time. Like in a month?
A month or so, yeah. And part of that might be because when I didn't use that process, what I would do was I would write a draft of a script and I'd think about changing something little. And like, well, let's see what the entire script would look like if I did that little change. Whether it be like, this character is actually a ghost or whatever, it's not that exact, but
Yeah, totally.
So I got in the habit.
We've had that conversation, that exact conversation.
So I would get in the habit, before that I kind of figure out my process, I would just write a lot of different drafts of something, and it got really tiring, which is why I did part of why I started that process, because if I was writing the scriptment, it was less work to redo a scriptment or an outline rather than do an entire new script and have to do like plotting and character arcs and all that.
It's like you're building a house.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing the blueprint stage, you're just like, actually, I'm just going to build the house.
Yeah.
And then you're like, nah, the bathroom's not there.
Yeah.
Then you have to build another house.
Exactly.
But you kind of let yourself do that too. Like, I get stuck on the blueprint forever.
Yeah.
And it's like the font at the bottom of the blueprint that's like Andrew's great blueprint.
Yeah.
And so, and I really like what you said about motivation versus discipline.
Yeah.
And what I want, like, a really tangible takeaway from this conversation would be, for any aspiring writers or whatever, believing in motivation is a killer.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing. Totally.
You can't wait till you're in the mood, till you're inspired. those things don't, it will happen like once a year that you're like, yes. And you're like sitting down and you're like, I'm having great ideas right now.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to rewrite those ideas anyway. But B, that like, you can't get anywhere with that. And it's so romantic and appealing, and it's a total killer.
And you're always never going to be happy with whatever you wrote, to a certain extent. Like, you're always going to have, I feel like especially your early drafts, they're called crap drafts for a reason. So it's like the sooner you can get through that, there's a mental thing of like, if I just get this scene on the page, even if the dialogue sucks, and if the dialogue's just like as simple as like, I hate you, no, I hate you, no, you suck, like just a really simple, but even if it's that simple, that's going to help me write the next pass, because hey, at the very least, I have like the beats. This character should say something like this, and it's like really simple. And then maybe you finesse the dialogue a little bit, and you just kind of whittle it down, kind of like sculpting. I mean, that's kind of how I would put it. And the more crap drafts you get through, the more good stuff eventually will come out, hopefully. But that's the idea. But when you write, though, that's the thing. Like, I write fast. When you write, it's pretty polished. Like I'll write like, if I was writing this as a scene right here, I'd say Jordan and Andrew are at a table, and then I would have no scene direction whatsoever. Yeah. It would just be dialogue, and it'd be, whatever was necessary. Because I'm usually directing what I'm writing, so I'm not putting any attention to readability.
And that's interesting to know. You do very much write as basically notes to yourself.
Exactly.
And where it's been really good for me to be more exposed to that mindset, because I tend to write for the academy of,
right.
And instead of just like, oh, right, this is a document that is going to be read by these people,
right,
who with these jobs, and all that's important is that they walk away with a really good understanding of what's happening in each scene.
Right.
Not that your writing's gonna win a Pulitzer or something like that, because that's not what a screenplay is for. Right.
And so I think that's what makes our work together interesting, because I'm thinking like the directing kind of, well, specifically on Little Black Submarines, I was thinking ahead of like, okay, this is what's like the bare minimum, what I need on the page to just remember myself.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, how's this, like, if someone picks this up, how readable is it? Like, how much sense does this make? Because I've definitely had conversations with Ethan or Zach before where it's like, well, Ethan has shot films for me where he hasn't read the script because he just gets it. But like, I've definitely had conversations where it's just like, I'll talk about something and they'll say, wait, what? And I'm like, it's in the script, and it's so like brief that they missed it or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh man, I had a thought about, no, it's gone.
No.
It's fully gone.
It's okay.
I was going to say a different thing later, or a while back, which was that our dynamic is kind of like, you're the gas and I'm the brakes, in terms of like, you're like pushing through the scenes. I'm like, let's stop and let's rearrange these things and stuff. Oh, what I was going to say is that you're comfortable with a high amount of improvised dialogue. So that's the other thing too, is like, for your dialogue, you're like, that's close, and then you move on to the next.
Exactly. Yeah. I won't nitpick dialogue. I don't know. There's certain scenes. It varies project to project. But on Little Black Submarines, it was definitely like, I just want the kind of beats of the scene.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I even told that to some of the actors. I was like, there's certain parts where I'm like, try to stick as close as you can. But then there's other parts where I'm just like, say just something close to this, approximate it. And, there's full on improv parts in the movie where we would kind of do the script and then we would just keep going and that stuff would make it in the movie, and then some of the more scripted stuff wouldn't make it into the movie. So there's kind of a interesting dynamic there between scripted and not scripted in our film, which was really, I think, I can't remember who said it. Someone asked if the car stuff was improvised.
In the car, riding in the car.
In the car, which from my memory, the scenes they were talking about were like the first 2 car scenes with Dylan and Gloria, and those are scripted actually.
It's ironic because I write to be I like it to be adhered to as close as possible because I really hear it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one scene I was okay with you guys improvising that I had written. Not that it was my call anyway, but I was like, wow, I'm gonna write some stuff and they'll improvise it. And that was the like side hustle. Don't like selling your poop and stuff. And
I think that's what someone was asking about. Like, was that improvised? Like, no, that was in the script.
I was like, you guys are gonna say whatever. There needs to be chemistry between you guys. That's the only thing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And then I watched the scene. I was like, oh, that was like word for word, which is funny because I'm not that chill, and that was the one time I was, and I was like, oh, great.
Yeah, that's funny.
Do you want to talk about timeline more of our partnership, or we've said it all, we just haven't connected the dots?
Well, I think so. Do you want to talk about story 1 a little bit?
I love talking about story 1. You have to rein me in on just how much I talk.
Well, I guess because this has really comprised the majority of our writing together. That's the thing.
We really have written 2 things together. It feels like more.
It would be different if it was like we did this, then this, and this, but it was like story 1 and then Little Black Submarines, really. Yeah. There was another project kind of in between, I feel like, where there was like a lot of brainstorming and breaking story, but...
Yeah, right after story 1, you sent me a couple doomed production scripts that were sort of had started, but nothing that had gone anywhere. And so I read 1 or 2 of those and gave notes. We worked for a while on I don't remember what it was called, but the Imaginary Friend one.
Yeah, Simon Follows.
Yeah. Did you make that movie?
No.
I should know.
Well, we've talked about it on our on this channel many times. We refer to it as like the movie that's never happened.
Yeah. So we worked for months on that one. And then...
The pandemic happened.
Well, that happened during story 1. And that's actually... You did the thing that a lot of people did during COVID, which was bunkered down and really made progress on a screenplay.
Oh, that's right.
And so you did a lot of work, and we passed back and forth, and we had some like outdoor balcony writing sessions and stuff, wearing the mask and stuff. And we submitted story 1 to a couple different places the same time that everyone else, in 2021, everybody was like, I finally finished my dream project and submitted it. So nothing happened with story 1 in that sense, but I just wanted it to be done. And I'm also totally comfortable with you putting it up online in some way, if people want some more context.
That might be good. Yeah, we could put a link in the description.
Yeah.
Probably Google Docs.
It's on cover. It's fully readable on cover.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do a link to that.
People could read it there.
Yeah, that'd be good. But so go check it out. But if you're not going to check it out, which is a little rude, but if you're not going to check it out, it was, how do you
summarize story 1?
Well, how do you summarize a story without ruining the pilot? Well, I don't guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was. Well,
let's assume people are not gonna go read it.
Yeah, let's assume people aren't gonna go read it because no one wants to read a screenplay, but it's good. It actually is good. So it basically stemmed from an earlier production company I was a part of, and our brand was Movies, which is too broad of a brand, in case you're wondering. And I was like, I want to write something narrative. They're like, it just has to be about movies. So I was like, okay, this takes place in a world where different genres are like, there's like a multiverse in different genres.
This is pre-multiverse craze too. This is like years before.
It was, yeah, I'd say yes. This was like 2014.
Yeah.
That I was kind of pitching this idea. So you can make your own call as to whether that was
Legitimate.
with the times or ahead of the time or behind the times. And yeah, so that we kind of had that big lens to look through. You brought some really cool lore into the background. There's a character called the editor, which we don't get into in the pilot, but it provides a framework.
Yeah.
For it provided a very cool device that we were able to access in the pilot that gave it some really nice structure. And it was there were a lot of drafts, and there was
a ton of drafts. Yeah.
If we there's who's related to who is like a big part of it in kind of a Star Wars sort of way of like following a family. And we finally like really cracked it late 2020. There were some aha moments, like sitting outside talking about it.
Yeah.
And so it follows this girl named Casey as she's like just graduating from high school and kind of charting the course of the rest of her life. And she wants to stay in this very kind of safe lane, but there's this whole other aspect of her life that she doesn't know about that kind of pulls her into this bigger thing.
Yeah. It's fun. It would be, I don't know what you'd compare it to. A little bit of Spider-Verse, probably. It's a more recent.
Yeah.
A little bit of that.
I just saw the pilot for Interior Chinatown, and there is
that looks pretty good. I haven't seen it.
Surprising amount of overlap.
Okay.
Interior Chinatown could be a spin-off of Story One.
Okay.
Very.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see.
I'll recognize it. Yeah. Yeah. It was, it was fun, and if someone wants to fund it, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Or buy it.
I intentionally wrote it to be a writing sample. So I was like, it doesn't have to be shootable. So there's tons of big set pieces and stuff that are absolutely Game of Thrones budget level.
Right.
So it was also really cool then to be working on Little Black Submarines, which was like, this is going to be shot.
Yeah.
And that it had been probably a decade since I'd actually written something narrative to be shot, and not just to write something to like try to impress unknown strangers,
Right.
It's like really, really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool opportunity.
And so how we got to there, because I know after Story One was kind of like done, we kind of did some other I think we dabbled in some other stuff, like some other writing stuff.
And then it was like, okay, it's your turn. Let's do one of your projects. And we definitely were working on Simon Follows. And we did we worked for a while on that one. It was sort of decided that was going to be scrapped by Doomed. And then I started working a little bit on an old script of Ethan's, I think.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, which has heart in the title. It's like Dark Heart or...
Oh, Black Heart?
Black Heart.
That was mine.
Oh, that's yours?
Yeah, that was mine.
Ethan's idea? No.
Well, it was inspired vaguely by something that Ethan went through.
I hope Ethan's watching this. I hope he's screaming.
Well, it came from it was one of those things where Ethan went through kind of like a crazy time, and to kind of let loose some steam, we were kind of joking, like, how would you turn this into a movie? And we would kind of joke about this situation, just to like make each other laugh. And I was like, hang on, that premise is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Which I don't care about spoiling. The premise of it would be a person moves in with their like new partner, like boyfriend, girlfriend, and they discover like the secret journal, and their curiosity gets the better of them, and they start reading the journal, and you think that their partner is like cheating on them. But then you read more, and then it turns out that their partner is actually like a vampire or a demon or like a succubus kind of thing. And which you could totally see how that could go into comedy or like horror. And in the version I think I had, it was like pretty hard into the horror aspect. But you could totally play that for laughs, and I think that'd be a fun. I think the hook is interesting. I think that'd be a fun hook of like wanting, just that curiosity getting the better of you.
And if it cuts both ways,
Yeah.
So I read that and gave some feedback on it, but that's as far as that went. And then you were like, sorry, I'm busy doing this other thing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, actually, kind of pull you in on Little Black Submarines.
Yeah. And that was would you want to say, so wait, it's 2024. It would have been early 2023. Would January, February, somewhere in there, do you think?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, you would know better than me, but I don't know how long the writing it was shot in the summer.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know I had the initial like kernel for the idea of our movie in August of the previous year, because I guess now's a good time to talk about Chlorine. You talk about Chlorine. Let's see. This is your final test.
Oh, no.
What is Chlorine? If someone doesn't know what Chlorine is,
I haven't seen it either. Chlorine is quite simply a crime film that follows a hitman named Pool Boy and his misadventures. I believe the tenets behind the movie are no script, or at least no written dialogue. I believe was a tenet of the movie, of the philosophy behind it.
I suppose. Well, yeah, it's
use as much copyrighted music as you want, right?
Well, it's yes and no. Yes, I mean, I guess,
and shoot for $0 budget.
I mean, that's more or less it. But it's like, it's this weird thing of like, Dan made these movies just kind of like, because that's Dan's style. And since then, other people have done movies in the universe, and they've kind of adopted those. So it's like, because Dan's not strict on rules like that necessarily.
I thought he was.
No.
I thought he was like Lars von Trier, and he was like, here's...
Dogma 95.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of that way. And
no, when I presented you with that document, that was my interpretation of what I had seen. Like, this is what makes up a movie in the Chlorine universe.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were like, there is going to be a script. Yes, we're still doing a bunch of copyright music, which horrified me as a good like film center or film school Boy Scout.
Yeah.
And
would have saved us a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah. Turns out it was fine.
Yeah.
Turns out use copyright.
I mean, hey, the movie's up now. It's only been 2 months.
For now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and then it was like those two things, and then it was also the three elements that I call like the three rocks that were
Yeah. So what had happened was Dan made this movie. Other people have made movies in the Chlorine universe, but our friends up in Yakima made The Mentor, which is out now, which you can watch on their channel. And when we were up, I think we went up to Yakima to do a screening of sorts, and up there we helped them shoot a couple scenes from it. Like I was in it, and I kind of had the idea for like a movie when we saw them making a movie, like a Chlorine movie. Because Ethan and I were just thinking, oh, what would it look like if Doom Productions did a movie in this universe? That would be kind of fun. And so I kind of got the seeds of an idea in August, and I don't think I really sat down to really write it until January of 23. And if I had the draft done, if I showed you a draft when you came on, that must have been near end of January or February.
That sounds right.
That sounds, yeah.
And then you did have a full script done. And then so something else about me is I'm a stay-at-home dad. So I don't really have margins of time really, and I'm always exhausted. But and I have ADHD. So, but the first thing I did when you sent me the script, because we send Google Docs back and forth.
Yeah.
So it's actually all there's a whole history there, and you can even see, like, if you went back
version
into
history,
it'd be like Jordan said this and Andrew changed to that. The very first thing I did was went all the way to the end and started writing the end, because I was like really wanting to zero in on that, on the showdown and the climax. And I don't remember who had the idea to intercut with a more like metaphysical space. I want to say it was me. I hope it was me. Do you know?
For the music sequence?
Yeah, to like cut back, to cut from the literal showdown to the band. I think it was me. Can I?
Well,
who do you think it was?
This is what I think it was. I know that the music, I wanted to have it cut to the concert. That was definitely mine.
Okay.
Because that came from
I know what I had.
another idea. But I think what you did was you added the showdown within the dream.
And I added like the other character. I was like,
exactly,
the other character.
That's what you brought to it. Because I think in my draft it just said like Dylan plays the song with the full band.
Right.
Yep. Something like that in draft one.
But
then you added all the other Chlorine characters in there.
Yeah, it was like, we see this person. And that's a classic Jordan, Andrew thing. Jordan had the idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to mess with Jordan's idea. And then Jordan writes another thing. I'm like, oh, I'm going to change this thing.
That's how it works.
So it all comes from here, and then I mess with it.
Yeah.
But, and then I wrote some stuff. Yeah, I wrote the end of the movie, and then I went back to the beginning and started writing. And then I didn't rewrite, like, the last act, basically.
Yeah.
Because I just was tired.
Yeah.
And we were sending stuff back and forth, but eventually you were like, it's going, like, we're getting it in actors' hands. And I was like, I pushed it as far as I could, which you don't hear people say in screenwriting very much. And I don't think most people do, but for it being such a side thing, we only can give so much to it.
Right.
But yeah, in my pass, I then really looked at Gloria and was like, kind of what is Gloria's arc? And that's where I had the idea of, if she's kind of very fearful at the beginning to more empowered at the end. And and that's, I kind of like kept an eye on her throughout that. And just a fun fact, you can tell I rewrote the ending before, because I wrote there's a moment where Gloria's like, I'm driving, you're a terrible driver, I'm driving, at the very, very end. And, you're like, but you're shot. And she's like, I'm still a better driver than you, even when I'm shot.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, and I'll set up this joke somewhere earlier in the movie. And I did not. There's no setup where Gloria's like,
you suck at driving.
Dylan, you're a terrible driver. So it's still fun, but if it feels like a punchline without a setup, it is.
It is, yeah. Yeah. One thing I'm sad that was cut was the opening sequence of the movie. Or maybe it wasn't the opening. It was the break-in sequence. And it wasn't cut, it was just significantly altered because what had happened, because you had written the Lorenzo stomping on Dylan's arm. And that idea came from you, Dylan having a crippled arm or a broken arm. That came from you because you were like, that would be really interesting. But you had that interesting where he gets his arm stepped on, and then you wrote this great scene, because there is in the beginning of the movie, 2 robbers break into Gloria's house, and they're like looking for her dad's stuff. And It was a really awesome scene that like you were like, where are we shooting this? And I was like, oh, I'll tell you where we're shooting it. And I drew up this diagram of the house we were going to shoot at.
I
and
had
it was
a
really
map
great
of the house, and it was like
it was such a
this room to this room and under this table.
it was such a fun sequence. And when it got close, like a week, well, I don't know how close it was to the date when we realized we couldn't shoot there.
It was
pretty
you were
close.
like shooting the next day, I want to say, or pretty close to it.
It was really close to shooting. And yeah, we couldn't shoot there, and so we scrambled pretty last minute to find where Gloria's house would be, because in the script, Gloria is living at her dad's place, which you see in The Mentor.
Yeah.
But because we couldn't shoot there for this movie, because it was an issue of the neighbors, because when there was going to be a lot in our movie where Gloria and Dylan were going to be outside of her house, and the house we were going to shoot at, they got really nosy neighbors who like to complain, and we were like, oh, we can't shoot there. How much of this is outside Gloria's house? And we're like, oh, kind of a lot. So we just
With like guns and
exactly.
stuff, yeah.
And we were like, we should just find a new place. She's moved, you know. So
which was fine.
yeah,
Like that was fine.
worked out. But as a result, the fun blocking, I think we lost quite a bit from script to screen with that break-in scene.
The thrust of that scene is that Gloria is bad with a gun.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing we know about Gloria. She's bad with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And which is fine, neither here nor there, except that we go to the flashback.
Yeah.
That I always call daddy-daughter target practice.
Yeah.
Mostly because there's another scene in story one that I kept I've written like 3 different versions of like the father and daughter in that show have like target practice when she's really little.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it made it into story one. But so I was like, oh my gosh, I can put it in here. And then she's really good.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that just lets the viewer know, like, okay, she had just as
experience with the weapon.
Kind of not a metaphor, because metaphors are bad, but like as a just a token of where she is like she did have like power and confidence that's gone, and then we get to see her regain it at the end of the movie. Yeah, and it's still the shading of that, I'd say, is still there. Yeah, but yeah. It would be great if there was a moment in that first scene where it was like, oh man, she really doesn't know how to shoot. But because of the way you had to block it, all we know is that she hits someone, and
it's one of those things which, I don't know, your experience is different because you were writing something, and then we kind of ran off and shot it, and then you saw what we had, and all I had was just like, well, we didn't have this, we didn't, you know, we had all these production issues, and
which is so classic, and that's what happens.
And that daddy-daughter practice sequence, I think that's an interesting case study, that scene, in terms of the script versus the film, because it's a really great scene in the script, and a lot more dynamic with moving. But it's one of those examples, I think, where it's like, even something really little, like a character walking across the field, can turn into hours on a shoot, because in the script, I think what happens is they do target practice. What's his name? Alvaro is like going over and like looking at bullseye. He's like picking up and reloading his gun. There's a lot of like more movement going on.
That sounds cool.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know there's a lot more movement in it.
Got it.
And in
just
the movie,
blocking wise.
Exactly. And in our movie, it's just they stand there and talk, and that's it.
Right, because of all the setups you have to get when characters in another spot, and how much time that adds to your day.
Exactly, and that was a packed day. That was the day we shot. That was actually, by the end of it, I was like, this is the hardest day ever. This is horrible. This movie's going like, because that was a day where we ran into a ton of just problems. Every day after that was kind of like it was easier, but like that was the hurdle to get over.
Well, that scene has my stamp of approval. So
okay, that's
it very much carries over from what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, there's a lot of that, I think, throughout the movie, and it's hard to, again, this is something we should have done months ago.
And well, probably the scenes I spent the most time on were the kind of shootout in the house that had to get significantly altered.
Yeah.
Lorenzo like taking the bullet out of one of his
which was cut out of the movie.
cronies. Yep.
Yeah.
And he's like intimidating Dylan and stuff, and we kind of get their dynamic. Spent a lot of time on that one, and then daddy-daughter target practice, and the very end, like the
final
shootout, the showdown at the end. And I'd say about half of those like completely translated over, and half of them had to significantly change. And
the world had other plans.
That's how it goes, especially when you're doing like no budget filmmaking.
Yeah.
But the movie's still good, and that's a good thing.
And it's still viewable as far as of right now. We'll see. But yeah, it's this was definitely a project where, I don't know, we definitely wanted to scale up. And I don't think when I was writing it, I realized like the implications of everything. And I think there was even parts where you were asking about logistics, and I told you like, don't worry about that. It's my problem later.
Yeah, there were a few times, especially like with the car chase and stuff, where I was like, really? And you were like, yeah, we're just gonna go for it. And then I pitched you another project when you were in post on this movie, and you were like, scale it down.
That's right. That's right.
No, less, way less.
Yeah.
You were a different person on the other side of shooting submarines.
Yeah. Which I'm happy the fact that the movie got made is a miracle, and I'm glad we did that, but I definitely learned a lot. And it's kind of one of those, like, I wouldn't change anything, but it's like, I'm very happy I have like the knowledge that I have now, because that's going to help us on every project we do afterwards.
And that's a really cool thing about your philosophy. And we've never had like a unpleasant interaction, but the closest we've ever come to butting heads would be in post on Little Black Submarines, because you're like there was a cut or two that I was like, okay, if we had these 5 shots, like if you go do pickup shooting and we get these 5 shots, put them here, like that would like improve this and this scene and this scene and this scene. And you're just like, we have to move on. And I'm such a perfectionist that it's really healthy for me to be like attached to that, because you're like, we're going to do our best, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to take all that into the next project.
Right.
And I'm like, I think that the like rocks will start falling down from the sky on you if you don't just make every little thing perfect. And so I think that's really cool. And the best example of that is the cut that I wanted for this the most, which was the narration cut.
So I guess in terms of the production, to get to the narration cut, we write the movie together. I think at a certain point I'm like, we just have to be done because actors need scripts and we need to prep for this movie. So I kind of take the script, and I think there were a couple of occasions where during production where I would just kind of say, hey, this thing came up, we can't do X, Y, or Z. Can you write something or type it? Can you brainstorm with me? And so during production, there was a little bit of that. I know it was a really hectic week.
I wasn't able to be as helpful as I was hoping for, but especially like with the shootout, because you didn't know where you were shooting, so it was really unclear, like
exactly
how it needed to be adapted and stuff. But
there's a couple of scenes like that, and I can't remember all of them. But after the movie, I think we had an assembly, and we had a version of the movie, and I can't remember what spurred it exactly. Maybe you would. But I remember either showing you a cut of the movie or us talking about a cut of the movie. And we were like, this isn't working how it is. And we decided the solution was to put narration over it.
And I think it was like, not so much this isn't working, like it's screwed, but it's like, here's 5 problems. Like
Exactly.
here's 5 big problems.
Yeah.
Like 3, it's probably like 3. And I don't even know if I was a part of the idea of narration. I want to say you were like just messing around, and you sent me a version of the opening with narration.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And so what you had done was what I called like a Big Short style narration, which wasn't quite that, because with Big Short they're also like cutting to like people in different contexts, like talking straight to camera, like explaining the whole movie. But as far as like
the energy,
a very involved narrator, high energy, lots of found footage, B-roll, like over things, and it was from Lorenzo's point of view initially, like right away.
I believe so. See, this is what.
No. I think it was a third person narrator.
Oh, you're right. It was a third person. Yeah.
There was a day that we were like, what if it's Lorenzo?
And I think the main reason for a lot of this was in terms of the plot mechanics and logistics of how do Dylan and Gloria essentially find the treasure, find the buried money. That was very convoluted, it felt.
There was a lot of plot, just like oatmeal that you just had to like get through, and it was like, we need this 5-minute scene because of this one sentence that someone says. And so we were going around and around, and then you experimented with narration, and I was like, yay.
And
it's the best.
And it was a third person narration, and we kind of were talking about what's the most interesting take we could get this. And it really was a case of, the edit is the third time you write the movie, because we'd written it,
very much.
We got and shot it, and like there's a little bit of like, Andrew, we need your help on set, and then total rewrite of the whole movie within the editing process, in which you were way more involved in that than I thought you would be, because I didn't think so much of the editing stuff would be like story related necessarily, which is really cool and interesting. And I
fell in love with filmmaking through editing. That was actually the first like ping. Then I like found writing, and that's like my favorite thing. But so screenwriting and editing are for me go hand in hand.
You have the exact opposite of my journey, I feel like. I got into, because I wanted to be a writer before I wanted to be a movie maker. I got in through writing, and now I'm like, oh, editing's my favorite now.
Oh, cool.
Just lock me in a room and let me just mess with some footage.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you you ended up with a kind of a sample of what the narration could be like. We were tinkering around, and I just remember coming home from your house one day, just like aglow, because we had landed on the idea of Lorenzo's the narrator. I was like, the villain's the narrator. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And we had chosen kind of like when he was narrating from, and
I mean, it was almost like having to rewrite the script, because it was kind of like we would have the timeline of the movie, and within the timeline it would be like narration 1, like at a certain scene you'd see that text pop up, and then we'd have a Google Doc of like, here's what that narration would be,
right, and then we'd
go back and forth, exactly,
of the narration back and forth, and then we got it to a place that was where the narration was really good. It had tightened a lot of things that didn't that were on the shaggier side. And then you had to make a tough call.
Yeah, that was, oh God. So, yeah, we had, I mean, this editing process, it was September, by the time the call was made, to April. It was literally April
Yeah.
1st because I think I texted you April 1st and I was like, hey, this is an April Fool's joke. But it was months of this reworking, retooling, and I was like, okay, the movie just needs to be done.
Right.
And I kind of showed the movie to Ethan and Zach and Caleb and Nathan as like, hey, here's what the movie will be. You know, any last little things because I'm going to lock picture because Vanessa's got to do ADR and that sort of thing. I think that was the big push was that we knew we had to do ADR. And if we were going to do narration, we had to know what exactly that was going to be. And I show the movie to them and they're like, great, great, great. And then Zach goes, you're not going to like this, but I can't stand the narration. It doesn't work for me. And on a project like this, you know, I try to listen to every bit of feedback I can because what's the worst thing that can happen is like what I hear an okay or bad idea, then I'm not gonna use it. But I try to give every kind of person on our team like, you know, some say in that. So we kind of went back and forth.
I can verify it's true. Jordan's extremely collaborative and here's all the ideas.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, you have to go with what you think is best.
Yeah. And so I was like talking with Zach, I was like, because the thing is, I was thinking of the plot mechanics, all the problems we had just solved.
We fixed a lot of stuff.
We fixed a lot of stuff. And as he was explaining it to me, I was like, I don't think it's going to work, but I'm going to play with this because I had nothing better to do. So I
play with no narration.
Exactly.
Right? Where that was where you started. Then you were playing with narration. Now you went back to playing. And it does come back to play again. It comes back to like, I'm just going to mess around.
Exactly.
Which is hard to do when you are completely burnt out and you also have a deadline looming.
Yeah.
But you have the ability to tap into that. And that's just another practical takeaway. It's like you have to make space to just like, I'm just going to mess around like I'm in a sandbox just playing and killing time.
Exactly. That's the only way you can do it. And so literally that night, I went into the timeline. I removed the narration because I think the big click for me, another big one was in our narration cut, Dylan's arm gets stomped on. Then it goes into this big short style narration of here's Yakima, here's what it's all about. And Zach was like, well, keep the song, do like a Spider-Man 2, like still frame recap of the previous movie. And I was like, oh, that would actually be kind of cool. Let's see how that looks. And I watched and I was like, oh, that works. All right, cool. And then I'm just going to keep going. And I would remove the narration. And what I had found out was that most of the problems that we had in terms of story-wise, just through the process of editing it with narration, we had been able to patchwork a lot of that stuff in a way where we didn't actually need the narration necessarily anymore in terms of conveying the story. Like, for instance, one thing was, I think oh geez, I should have thought of something. I can't remember. I think this is one, from my memory. How Dylan and Gloria find the house. Like, how did they go to the library and go to the abandoned house?
And this is what every conversation was like in the like rewriting and editing was like, they need this clue.
Yeah.
How do we make it clear that this nudges into that? And
exactly. I think one of them, there's something like that. And I think in the script it was Gloria's left a clue. She's left this letter. She's left this key and this mask. And she's left this name. She goes to the library to investigate this name. And okay, I can't remember. It was very convoluted. And in doing the narration, we had been like, oh, there's an easy way to simplify Gloria to the house. It's to remove this extra name we don't need and just make these consolidate it all into one. And it was it was way more straightforward. Yeah. And when you took out the narration, that the
fix was still there.
The fix was, exactly.
In that sense, the narration kind of served as a cast while a bone was healing. And you never would have gotten there without it.
Exactly.
But eventually you were like, we're good. We don't need to cast anymore.
Yeah, and you can see this moment in our making of documentary because it was that night I was like, because that night I watched through the whole movie and I was like, with no narration, and I was like, I feel numb to all of this by now because it'd been months and months and months. And I sent a message to the guys and I was like, so I'm sending you the movie with no narration, and it could also exist with narration, but I need to lock this thing like in the next week or so. What do I do? And part of what helped me was that everyone I showed the movie to, like I think out of all the crew members, like, or I guess the core team of Ethan, Zach, Caleb, and Nathan, Ethan and Zach, they were like, oh yeah, I think this works better with no narration. Caleb and Nathan were like, I really don't want to lose the narration. But then they came down and they saw it with no narration and they were like, never mind, that's better. And then we showed it to Ghoul Capone, some of our other filmmaking friends, and they saw the cut with no narration and they tracked everything just fine. And I was like, based on just that,
coming in
with no context, they had never seen Chlorine, didn't know what Chlorine was. They were like, yeah, this works great. This movie's awesome. And I was like, okay, just based on that, that reaction, as well as if we have to do all of David's narration, that's going to add X amount of time onto our thing. It just makes more, and I remember there was also some B-roll that we would have had to get as well for the narration. So just based on...
Well, right, because it was going to be a huge, another huge push.
Yeah.
To get all the voiceover recorded.
Yeah.
And part of the dynamic of filming is that it takes place in Yakima, but it was written and edited in
Portland.
Which is, how long of a drive is it?
It's like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, yeah.
And everyone's got lives, and it basically, for me, what it came down to was you being like, I have to like let people move on from this, and I have to not like drag people through what would have to happen,
right?
Because even with the narration, we then were like, we'd have to add some footage to kind of make the narration make sense, because of the conceit that we had for it, and you just had to make that call of like, sure, in a perfect world with like tons of money, and maybe you don't feel this way. I feel that it would have been a very strong cut, but would have required time and money and energy that just wasn't there.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those things going into it, I could see that we wouldn't have had necessarily the time and resources to make that narration cut perfect as it would have been. And that's kind of what made me okay with it. Like, even though we just done massive overhaul the last few, undoing all of that in like a night, I was like, even if we went through the narration, I know that X, Y, and Z probably wouldn't have happened, even though that would really make this thing really strong. It was just, the movie works fine without it. A lot of people have reacted really strongly to it without the narration, and just the logistical aspect of it, all of it. I just had to just be like, okay, I guess it's no narration. Like 4 months of work undone, or whatever. But that's filmmaking. That's like, you know.
My favorite creative story is Stone Soup, because to me, the point of that story is you have a pot of water, you don't have anything else.
Right.
You put something bad in the pot.
Yeah.
And you put a rock in there. And then over the course of time, you're just like stirring it, and you're like telling yourself like, this is going to be something, and you're adding things, other people are adding things. And eventually you have to take the rock out. Right. And that's kind of like what happened. Even though I'm a huge fan of that cut, I still am like, it was your call because you're the director, but also like in that sense of the truth of that parable or folktale, it rings true on that level too. Yeah, because you just recognized like, and also like, even though I'm like always loved that cut, it wasn't the movie. The movie as it is right now is much closer to the movie we set out to make. We kind of were like, well, let's make a different movie to make it work. And it's good. Yeah. But you ended up landing back at
where we started,
where you wanted to land.
Yeah.
There just were it was a lot. It was a roller coaster in between there that you didn't see coming, but you ended up landing back on that mark.
And I think that's how a lot of writing will go sometimes, where I would do like kind of like when I would do lots of drafts or versions of a script, you know, I'll write a script and I'll think, well, what if this character wasn't her best friend, but that was her grandma? What would that look like? And then I would just write that whole version of the script. That's kind of what it reminded me of, this editing thing, of just like, what would happen if there's a narrator? Let's go down that entire rabbit hole. Let's explore every kind of avenue. Let's talk about the implications for each scene, how we would make it work. And ultimately we're like, we're going to go back to no narrator. And you kind of back where you started, which happens in writing all the time. And I think another kind of example of how writing and editing are connected, because you'll have that kind of, you know, cause and effect part of storytelling, or, you know, crafting your movie, that happens in editing and in writing, in those two stages of filmmaking. And I think if you're a good writer, that'll help your editing, and vice versa. If you're a good editor and you know how to convey a story visually, that'll help your writing. But yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. You know.
But really rewarding and really cool to have a movie that was shot and people have watched and people have liked. And I really appreciate you inviting me along the process, because it's easy to get lost in the like trying to impress invisible crowd, kind of not crowd as people who are watching the movie, but like people that you're going to submit the screenplay to in a contest or something like that. Right. Or like, oh, if I meet this person one day, I can give them a copy of it, and they'll like, it's easy to get lost in that. And what I loved about Doom Productions is you're always just actually doing the work. You're actually boots on the ground, making things. Right. And embracing the imperfection that comes with actually making things, because the only way to be perfect is to not make anything. Right. And that is such an easy trap to fall into. And I love that, of your philosophy of just like more people should just be making movies. Yeah. And not perfect polished movies, but just trying it out and just going for it, and learning from that and expressing themselves. And you're not necessarily gonna get something that fulfills the kind of maybe the film student's dream of where they get to in the end of standing on the stage, accepting an Oscar and that kind of thing. But just like that self-expression and that grittiness is really, really cool. And I really like that philosophy. I think it's the exciting part for me about filmmaking of like, would it be nice to get paid millions of dollars in Hollywood? Yeah, I'd really like that money. Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah. But I think what's exciting artistically is we're living in a time where, filmmaking is the same as like any other art, where, you do have professionals, but you also have kids, drawing Crayola crayon stuff. It's so democratized. And if you're a kid or if you're a teenager and you say, oh, I like painting. I like doing painting, or I like drawing, or I like doing charcoal sketches and that sort of thing. No one looks at you funny. Whereas I feel like the implication was in years past, if you say, oh, I'm into filmmaking, it's like, oh, then you must want to go to Hollywood. You want to be in the business. You want to be in the film industry. There's all these kind of professional and business implications behind the
the art form of film. Whereas now it's just like,
that are all well and good,
yeah,
but it's easy to forget that those are tacked on.
right,
Those aren't actually the thing.
right,
That's the package that the thing can come in.
yeah.
And that's so easy to forget that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people do forget that. There's a lot of, I've bumped and rubbed, bumped elbows with, I've encountered quite a few like very like, this is how you do it in this Portland independent thing.
Sure.
And that's cool. That works for them. It's not quite my scene. Like I don't quite connect with all of that. And so I'm really happy that there's a space for people who they aren't like amateurs, but they don't want to be professionals who just like making movies. I think that's a cool thing to exist right now with the technology that we have, which is really cool. Especially with all the like new digital tools that are, like After Effects or stuff that's happening just in iMovie or DaVinci or Final Cut, like all the new stuff that's going on there. Like pretty soon, I think you're going to start seeing a lot more, not just Hollywood level on a technical level, but like in terms of scale and scope, you're going to see bigger movies being made by people just in their backyards, which is, I think that's really exciting, just like in Blender and stuff. But yeah.
I always compare it to like a garage band.
Yeah.
Where it's just like the point of it is that you're with your friends making music.
Yeah.
And you love it to be more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to push the signal as far as you can.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's about the life-giving power of that.
Yeah.
Of just doing what you love.
Mm-hmm.
and giving it all you got, and it's really cool to see that approach applied to filmmaking too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we should probably wrap up, but I mean, I wonder what, thinking of like, I don't know, normally this is where you'd ask people what's next, but I don't know if we even know.
Well,
We've had discussions.
I'm writing something.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because you've been really in the trenches with Little Black Submarines. That I've like, oh, my crutch is gone, and I'm having to actually write this by myself. And I've been trying to apply that philosophy that of just get things on the page, like just move. Something I'm trying to do with this new thing is having a document, like you're saying, like outline document, like just never leaving that document. And as dialogue comes to you, as more scenes come to you, just keep expanding. But you're never like, okay, I'm done with the thing, now I'm moving to a blank page. It's just like you're just growing that one thing.
It's like a journal.
And then eventually it can, like, some things are like actual screenplay scenes. Some are just beats that are really sketchy. But you're never like facing the white page that's like, oh my gosh, what should happen on this page? It's like, oh, there's lots of stuff. Oh, I'll rewrite this, I'll fix that, I'll tweak that. Because rewriting for me is a lot easier than writing. So keeping it in the more rewriting, just as a way to trick.
That's an interesting way. I haven't thought about doing something like that. That's interesting. Do you do it on paper or is that on Google Docs?
It's Google Docs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But the idea of just having one Google Doc that originally was like 2 sentences that just of like notes.
Right.
And then it's grown into a beat sheet that has some scenes in it too.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything.
Well, let's say that if you hear about a movie called Fell Hall coming from Doomed Productions, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Fell Hall. Yeah, should be fun. Yeah, I think it's a good place to wrap up. Thanks for chatting about
Thank you, Jordan.
the movie we made.
Thank you again for bringing me on board.
Yeah.
And just having like my hands on like an actual movie that's actually getting made,
Oh yeah.
has been so good for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been great having you.
Let's rub elbows.
All right. That works. We'll cut there somewhere.